Okay. Me sitting down for the documentary on why I've been gone so long. Whoops. Hi guys, and welcome back to the episode of Lipstick and Lore. Roll the intro. Today I'm going to be your host in the spooky, strange, unsolved, conspiratorial, and historical cases that plague my mind, and now have to plague yours. Today's case is quite a woozy, and one that is personally a fan favorite of mine, and that is the case of D.B Cooper. I'm sure if you're into the conspiracy theory, unsolved realm of the internet, you've definitely heard of this case before, but it is one that I think is not super, mainstream, and that I personally enjoy and love talking about, and it happened in the 70s, which is, a great time for unsolved things to happen, apparently. They were just solving nothing in the 70s. But without further ado, let's get into today's case. And handing it back over to non-voiceover me. But before we get into today's case, I have to introduce you guys to somebody. This is somebody very important, okay? Let me welcome our new guest star. Drum roll, please. I got a new microphone. Isn't she gorgeous? Yeah, my other one decided that it wanted to quit on me. So that was one of the reasons that I haven't uploaded a new video, because I didn't have a mic. But look at this one. I really don't know how to act. Ooh, ow. To be completely honest with you. So, we'll see how it goes. Let me know if this audio sounds better or worse than it has in the past. Also, let me show you her without her hat on. She looks prettier without her hat on. She looks stupid with the hat, unfortunately, but whatever. She's white and pearlescent and very pretty. And I feel like we need to name him. Could be a dude, could be a girl, I'm not really sure. And I want to know what you guys think I should name them. And I'll take the top comments and I'll put them in a poll. And then you guys can vote. Let me know down below, because hopefully it'll be sticking around for a while. Anyway, I'll get into the video now. Nobody cared about that, but I did. I know somebody really hated that. And I'm sorry. I'm not, but I'm sorry your feelings were hurt by that. Also, a moment of silence for the nails. Thank you. Anyway, let's get into today's case. Sorry, I don't know how to act. I haven't been here in a while. My bad, guys. Let me not act a fool. Today's case is a little bit less... It's still true crime, but it's more of the unsolved, mysterious true crime, which I think is more so... Nobody gets hurt in this case, which I like. I think I'm going to take a break. Just a little break from doing the gory stuff. And not that any of my videos are really gory, but I'm gonna take a break from the murder for a while. Not a while, just a few videos. Just because, I don't know, reading about, the world is already in shambles. So, I just think, maybe taking a break from reading about murder all day would be beneficial. And it's my channel, so I can do what I want. Also, I don't know why I make that face when I do that. I'm sorry. It doesn't hurt. So I don't know why I'm, bracing for impact. But, yeah, so I think I'm going to do a little bit more of the... Oh my gosh, there's a hair. Thank you. little more of the unsolved, mysterious, conspiracy theory kind of vibe. So if you guys have any recommendations for that, definitely check it out. There's this girl on here, and I'll link her in the comments probably. She does like video essays. Oh my gosh, I love her. So talented. I can't think of her name right now, but I'll put like it in the comments, and I'll also like put a picture right here of who she is. But she does a lot of like conspiracy, like unsolved, not like it's true crime, but it's not murder, you know? And I love that. So she definitely inspired me to do this. So this definitely fits under the lipstick and lore category. But now that I've been yapping for an egregious amount of time, let's get right into. So today's case is one that is objectively one of my favorites, and that is the case of D.B Cooper, aka Dan Cooper, which most of you have probably heard of. It's a pretty well covered one. I wouldn't say it's like mainstream or anything, but I'd say like if you're into conspiracy theories or unsolved mysteries, you've definitely heard of it. There's probably 1,000,001 like articles out there about this, and I encourage you that if you like this video to definitely go check some of those out, especially like the interviews from the people involved, because their stories are just like low-key kind of hilarious. Like, I don't know, I kind of giggle when I read them because they're just funny, you know? This whole situation is just funny, and nobody got hurt, so I can like say that. And hello. And like, okay, whatever. That's out. My bad. Yeah, it's just kind of funny. But if you don't know, D.B Cooper is a hijacker of a plane. And like I said, nobody got hurt, so I'm kind of okay with it. Like, he did get away with it. This case is unsolved till this day, and it happened in the 70s, so the likelihood of it being solved is very slim, especially because there is no DNA evidence, which is the biggest thing that solves cold cases from before DNA testing, is DNA testing. But with there being no DNA evidence and relatively no leads, I would assume this case will stay unsolved, and honestly that makes this guy kind of a legend, because that's hilarious that he hijacked a plane, nobody got hurt, and he got away with it. I'm okay with that. I mean, call me crazy, but I'm okay with that. So on November 24th, 1971, Thanksgiving Eve, which I think is, I've never heard like someone say that. That's probably not an original thought, but that's what I'm going to say, Thanksgiving Eve. On Thanksgiving Eve, a man approached the flight counter for Northwest Airlines, which, if you didn't know, Northwest Airlines is now acquired by Delta, so it's just basically Delta, but it originally was called Northwest Airlines. You could go up to like the ticket counter, like you couldn't buy online like you do now. Like, you don't go on the website, and like now when you book a flight, I don't know, I've never been on a plane, guys, calm down. But from what I've gathered is that you basically like go online, you put in where you want to go, you pick your airline type, you order the ticket. Back then, you walk up to the ticket counter, which I think you can still do. I don't actually know. I feel like you still can. But you walk up to the ticket counter, hey, I want to go to Mexico. And then you pay for the ticket. And he paid for this ticket in all cash, which, once again, back then probably wasn't that suspicious because cash was more regular back then. So nobody really thought anything of it. And you also have to remember in this, because comes up later, is that like TSA was like not a thing. That only happened, at least here in the US, happened like after 9/11. So there was no TSA. You could also smoke on the airplanes at this point. So it definitely was a whole different ballpark. And this probably, you'd never be able to get away with this today because TSA is like crazy. Like, God forbid you bring a bottle of shampoo, okay? You might as well be committing treason. So this man was at Portland International Airport, and he purchased a one-way ticket to Seattle Tacoma International Airport. So a one-way ticket, in case you don't know, basically means like you're not booking a returning flight. And on his ticket, the name that was put was Dan Cooper, which is our main guy here. Okay? The legend, the myth himself, Dan Cooper, which police and detectives could not confirm if this was actually his real name, which makes it all the funnier because he could be out there and his name could be like John. But he'll forever go down in history as Dan Cooper. Well, mostly D.B Cooper, but we'll get into that later. Eyewitnesses describe Cooper as a white man in his mid-40s, so half the population. Great, that's really going to help us here. Very descriptive. They said he had dark brown hair and brown eyes, and this is a key point later because one of the suspects that they interview has light eyes, and everybody was like, no, like this guy had dark brown eyes, which, me too, join the club. But a lot of witnesses said that he was pretty much unassuming looking. There was nothing that really stood out, except for the fact that he was wearing sunglasses indoors, which is kind of like, who does that, But that's not crazy. Like, so what? He was wearing sunglasses indoors. There's crazier things in the world than a dude wearing sunglasses indoors. He was said to be either wearing a black or very dark brown business suit. They said he was wearing a white shirt and a thin black tie, as well as loafers and black briefcase. And he also had a brown paper bag with him, which maybe that's his lunch. I don't know. And once again, back then TSA was not a thing, because that was a big thing in this case. People were like, well, why didn't he get stopped by security? Because, like, they didn't care. Like, in the 70s, you could literally walk back to the cockpit. Like, you could just walk in there. You can't do that anymore. Like, they won't allow you to do that. But he boarded Flight 305, a Boeing 727-100, which, don't ask me what that means, because I don't know. Somebody who has more plane knowledge. It's like my, what is that degree called? Aerospace engineering. All you people, let me know, because I don't know what that means. But apparently it's like an older plane that has been used, especially in the Vietnam War, to drop supplies out of it, because it had like a, instead of, airplanes, they roll up the staircase for you to get out. This one had it pre-built into the bottom of the plane. I'm sure they still had the one you could roll up and whatever, but it had one on the bottom of the plane that actually came down. They're called flight stairs, and so stuff could be dropped out of the plane onto, like, battlefields or camps or whatever. And it was also used as a bombing plane, because you could drop stuff through the bottom. So that's basically what it was, in case you were wondering, but don't ask me what those like numbers and letters mean, because I don't know. So Cooper took the very last row in this plane, which was 18E, and he sat down and ordered a drink from a flight attendant, and it was a bourbon and 7-Up. I almost said Sprite, but I knew that wasn't right. Bourbon and 7-Up, which, okay, cool. We're getting drunk on a plane. He was one of 36 passengers on this aircraft, as well as 6 members of staff, including the captain, William A. Scott, first officer, William Bill J. Ratasak, flight engineer Harold E. Anderson, flight attendant Alice Hancock, Tina Mucklow, and Florence Schaffner. So those are our staff members, and then I'm not going to name all the passengers, because 1, I don't even know all the passengers, and 2, they're really not that important to this story. I'm sure it's a very important story to them, but they're not players in this. So Flight 305 left for Portland on schedule at 2:50 p.m. EST, which is Eastern Standard Time, in case you didn't know. He was sitting in the row behind Cooper because it was the jump seat, and like when the plane takes off, the air hostesses buckle in. So she was sitting there and she dropped it into her purse, And she thought nothing of it. And Cooper, seeing this, was like, turned around, looked at her, whispered, "Ma'am," which he's so polite throughout this whole thing. He was like, "Ma'am, you might want to look at that note. I have a bomb." Which, I don't know what I would do in that situation. I'd be like, what? That's funny. That's funny. I think I would have to think it was a joke. So upon this, she opened the note because obviously she's like, "Oh crap, this guy's got a bomb. Probably a good idea." So she does. She opens it up, and the note is handwritten, and it says, quote, "Miss, I have a bomb in my briefcase and want you to sit by me." End quote. She sits by him. "Hey, how you doing?" Like, what do you say after that? Like, you sit by him, sit down, you're like, "It's nice weather today." Like, what? You have a bomb. There's 36 people, or 36 passengers, and she's, like, responsible for all of them, and you just have to sit there and be like, "Yeah." So she does sit by him, though, and she starts talking to him, and is kind of asking, like, what's going on, you know? So when she sits down, she returns the note to him because he asked for it back. She's like, "Here you go, take it." And then she goes, oh my gosh, she is such a baddie for this. Like, I'm sorry, absolutely legend. She goes, "Can I see the bomb?" I would never have thought to say that. I would have been like, "Please don't murder me, Mr. Ghostface. I want to be in the sequel." But she does. She asks to see the bomb. She goes, "Show it to me." So he pops open the briefcase, and inside, she said there was a large cylindrical battery attached with wires to 2 rows of 4 red cylinders that she assumed was dynamite. So, I mean, I'm no expert, but that sounds like a bomb. Allegedly. And it does, I'm just going to put this in here now because I think it's important. Police never confirm or denied if this was an actual bomb. So he may have literally had no bomb at all. It might have been completely fake. There is 0 proof that he did in fact have a bomb. Like, of course, the air hostess said it was, but, like, does she really know what a bomb looks like? Like, that could have just easily been, like, a couple of batteries and some random metal whatevers strapped together. Or it could have been a legitimate bomb. I guess we'll never know. So after this, she looks at it and she's like, "Yep, that looks like a bomb." So Cooper closes the suitcase, and the air hostess basically is like, "What do you want? What's your demands?" So Cooper tells her his demands, but he wrote it all on this note, and he handed it to her and said, "Oh, take this to the cockpit." Which he did. She did. She took it to the cockpit to give it to the captain. But this note was really weird because it was written in all capitals with a felt tip pen. It wasn't like in cursive. It was like printed in all capitals with a felt tip pen. So she brings it to the captain, and the captain tells her to sit in the cockpit, like stay there, don't go back, and to take notes about the events as they happen. So he basically said, like, write down everything that happens in the order that they happen. So she obliges and continues, and so he reads the note, and he sends it back to air traffic control, and this was the demands that were made. So he relayed this to Northwest Flight Operations in Minnesota. He said that the hijackers' demands were, quote, 4 parachutes, a request for $200,000 of unmarked American currency, and a knapsack by 5 p.m., He wants 2 front parachutes, 2 back parachutes, and he wants the money in negotiable American currency that is unmarked. Which, weird way to say it, but whatever. By requesting 2 sets of parachutes, Cooper implied that he had planned to take a hostage with him, because typically if we're jumping out of a plane, you really only have 2 parachutes, like for one person, or like if you're like strapped to somebody. And this is typically your main parachute and then your backup parachute just in case the first one fails, which would be my worst nightmare possible. I would love to go skydiving, but I would definitely do it like I'd have to do it like with me being strapped to the person, because having me do it by myself, I'd panic and then like not be able to pull the parachute, and then I'd be screwed. So I definitely would do it with a person, but I think it would be a fun experience, but not like this, not when I've hijacked a plane. So the captain kind of thought he's taken a hostage. He thought, great, he's taken a hostage. That's what it's going to be. And he relayed this to the air traffic control, and they basically said, okay, we hear you. Stall for a little bit. So with the first air hostess, which was Schaffner, in the cockpit, there was another flight attendant, which everybody called Muck. Her last name is Mucklow. And she went out and actually sat next to Cooper, which, oh my goodness gracious. This lady has guts. Okay, truly, she does. Like, the most guts I think I've ever heard. So when Muck went out there to sit by Cooper, he made additional demands about what he wanted when they landed. And he said that he wanted, upon landing at the SeaTac, fuel trucks must meet the plane and all passengers must remain seated while Muck brought the money aboard the plane. Cooper said he would release the passengers after he had the money. The last item brought aboard would be the 4 parachutes. End quote. So that was his extra demands, and Muck was kind of just like, okay, I got you. What else? So she relays this to the captain, who relays it to SeaTac Air Traffic Control. And Air Traffic Control is like, we hear you, we got you. And they prepare all the preparations for the landing, but while they're doing this, the plane like circles in the air, and they told the passengers, because they didn't tell them that this guy's got a bomb, because you don't want mass hysteria. So they tell him like, oh, there's like an issue with like turbulence and that, and we're like gonna have to land, but we can't land right now. It was a whole thing. So the passengers were not aware. So on the ground, the president of Northwest Airlines at the time went ahead and authorized the payment of the ransom. He basically said like, yeah, like we'll give this guy the money. And also, in case you were wondering, unmarked, because I forgot to explain this earlier, basically means that it's money that isn't traceable. Like, the serial numbers have not been written down, so that if it's spent, there is no way of tracing it. And also, like, there's no markers on the bills themselves that can be traced, because sometimes they put, like, you know when they, like, do the pen thing at the, like, the store or the bank or whatever? Sometimes they'll put like things there that can be seen through that. Sometimes they'll give it like special serial numbers or other things of that sort. He basically asked for the money to not have any of this, which is understandable because you don't want to be traced when you're taking a bunch of money. For approximately 2 hours, Flight 305 circled Puget Sound. I think I say that wrong, but it looks like Puget, maybe? Puget Sound? Don't ask me. And this was basically to buy time for the SPD and the FBI to assemble the ransom money for Cooper. Muck had said that he seemed pretty like familiar with the terrain, which is kind of interesting because this is not like, this is the place he flew to, not the place that he flew from. So maybe he's actually from the area that he flew to and not the area that he flew from, but I'm not entirely sure, and investigators aren't entirely sure. But she said that Cooper had said while looking out the window that it looks like Tacoma down there, as the aircraft flew above Tacoma. So she said like he seemed pretty familiar with the area because he seemed to know the terrain. Cooper correctly noted McCord was only 20 minutes drive from SeaTac. She later described that like he seemed very knowledgeable in not just like terrain but also the geography of the place, which once again could suggest that maybe he was actually from the Tacoma area and not from where he flew from Portland. So it was definitely a little weird, but she said that he wasn't nasty, and he even tried to tip the air hostesses, but they said it was against company policy and they couldn't accept tips. But she said that he didn't seem nasty or cruel, which is, once again, interesting for a hijacker. So while the airplane was circling, Muck chatted it up with him because, like, honestly, what else are you supposed to do? You're sitting next to a hijacker. You can't really go anywhere. You're in an airplane. It's not like you can run away. So she talked to him, and she asked why he chose Northwest Airlines to hijack, thinking that maybe like he had some sort of reason for choosing that airlines. And he said, quote, "It's not because I have a grudge against your airline. It's just because I have a grudge," end quote. Before he explained that the flight simply suited his needs, which he didn't elaborate further on this, but some people assume that it was because of the type of plane, because this specific plane 305, or this flight 305, like the plane was older. Like I said, it was used in Vietnam to drop supplies and like bombs and things. So it was an older plane that didn't necessarily have the same build and things like the other. And I'll get into that a little bit more later because it does kind of come up again. And not only that, but also just where the flight was heading. Maybe that's why, like maybe that fit his needs better than others. But yeah, it was stated that he didn't do it because he had a grudge against Northwest Airlines. So it wasn't because Northwest, like it could have been any of them. This flight just so happened to fit his needs. Cooper actually asked her where she was from, and when Muck responded that she was originally from Pennsylvania but was living in Minneapolis at the time, Cooper responded and said that Minnesota was a very nice county. And Muck went ahead and asked Cooper where he's from, but he became kind of upset and refused to answer. Like, not like upset, but she said he became like kind of standoffish and was like, I can't answer that, you know? Which makes sense. He's hijacking a plane, so I guess like he kind of can't answer that. And I think maybe the reason he got a little upset was maybe because he thought like Muck was trying to like, I don't know, corner him or something, like get more information than she needed. He then offered her a cigarette, which she said she rejected and said that she had quit smoking recently. And he said, "Are you sure?" And then she accepted because she said it was a stressful situation and why not have a smoke, you know? Which I'm not judging, you know? I mean, one, he's got a bomb, so I wouldn't really want to say no to anything he's got. Two, like, sure, whatever. You know, yeah, she probably thought she was about to die, so, like, might as well have a smoke, am I right? Also, like, just the line of conversation they were having is just so, like, normal that it was kind of funny to me. Like, this whole thing just makes me giggle a little bit, because he's not, like, threatening anybody. He's not like, I'm gonna blow everybody up, you know? He's just kind of like, you want a cigarette? And she's like, nah, I quit smoking, man. He's like, you sure? And she's like, yeah, I guess I'll take a cigarette. You know, like, it's just kind of funny. Like, when you think of, like, a hostage hijacking situation, you think he's like, everybody get down on the ground. Like, I've got a bomb, you know? But he was just like, yeah, Minneapolis is a nice place. Like, I think that's just so funny to me. He was such a chill guy. So, the $200,000 was received from the Seattle First Nation Bank, and it was in a bag weighing approximately 19 pounds, which is 8.5 kilograms for my non-American viewers. And this was because the ransom money was made out of 10,000 unmarked $20 bills, which, I mean, I guess he didn't specify what he wanted it in, but all 20s? You gave this man all 20s? I mean, you couldn't, yeah, like, I guess I guess that works, you know? I guess it's like, yeah, it's what he asked for, but also, dang, 20s, all 20s. That's a lot of 20s. Cooper had specifically requested unmarked, so he got his unmarked. And the money, most of the serial numbers beginning with L, which are indicated by the insurance policy that the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco had. And this was because they actually had a specific, like, sum of money set aside for ransom, which is kind of crazy that that's just like a thing you have on hand. Do all banks do that? If you're a banker, let me know. And there was 2 front reserve parachutes that were taken from a local skydiving school, and there was 2 back parachutes from a local stunt pilot, which I don't know why, but I assumed like airplanes just had parachutes on them. I think that stems from like movies though. I guess like I just watch too many movies. Like I said, I've never been on a plane, so I don't know anything about planes. I don't know. But I just like would assume why don't planes? Why don't they have like, I guess it'd be expensive. It's probably a money thing, but I was going to say, why doesn't like every airplane like underneath the seat of their passengers like not have like a parachute, like in case it crashes? Like what do you think? I don't know. Maybe that's like, I don't know. There's probably a reason, but that's just my thought process. Just give us all parachutes, right? I don't know. But they obtained these 4 parachutes for him, which they still believed he was taking a hostage, which at this point they kind of thought was like gonna be Muck. They were like, oh crap, he's taking Muck with him. Which, the fact that they did nothing to stop that is kind of interesting to me. They're like, you know what, sister, you're gonna have to take one for the team, okay? But yes, at this point they still think he's taking a hostage, which, not the best. Around roughly 5:24 PST, which is Pacific Standard Time, in case you were wondering, the passengers on Flight 305 were, in fact, released unharmed. Nobody was harmed, and also they really didn't know, like, that there was even a hijacking until, like, afterwards. So they designated a person to bring in the parachutes, and this person was Northwest Seattle Operations Manager Ali, which he took his job very seriously, let's say that, okay? He took his job very seriously to avoid the possibility that Cooper might mistake Lee as like an authority person. He took off his uniform and put on regular like civilian clothes because he didn't want to take any chances of Cooper being like, this guy's with the FBI. So he put on regular clothes. Like I said, he took his job very seriously. He said they gave him that job and he said bet. And he took the parachutes and brought them to Cooper on the plane, as well as Muck, who left the aircraft and then brought the money back to him, and all the passengers were released, and Cooper examined the money, and he was a little annoyed. He was a little annoyed because it was heavy, and obviously if you're going to jump out of a plane, you don't really want anything super heavy. So he was kind of like, bro, like, why'd you give it to me in all 20s? Like, what the heck, dude? You couldn't throw in a couple hundreds, you know? What's up with this? But ultimately, he accepted it. Like I said, pretty chill guy. He was like, you know, not what I wanted, but I guess, like, it's fine, you know? And so he's still with Muck, by the way. Muck's, like, just straight chilling, which at this point, I think if I was Muck, I'd kind of be like, am I coming with you? Like, are we accomplices now? Do I need to, like, lock in? But she jokingly asked, like, hey, can I have some of it? Not expecting him to say yes. And then Cooper opened the bag and took out a stack of bills and handed it to her. I'm sorry. That made me giggle even harder. He said, "Oh yeah, you want some? Here you go. You want it? You can take it." And then she turned around and basically said, like, it's actually against company policy. We can't accept payment from passengers. Which is crazy. The fact that he was just so willing, like, stack of 20s. That just blew my mind. Oh, another thing that he was kind of, like, annoyed about was that they gave it to him in a, like, cloth bank bag instead of, like, a paper bag. But once again, he was like, I guess it's fine or whatever, Which I just think is funny. Like, he's just funny. He's just a funny guy. I don't think I would have been able to, like, hold it together with this man. I would have been like, "Sir, is this your first time hijacking? Like, what is up with you?" But all of the passengers were, in fact, disembarked safely. And one of the other flight attendants asked Cooper if she could retrieve his purse from behind. Retrieve her purse. Sorry, I said that wrong. She could retrieve her purse from behind his seat. And he said, and this quote makes me giggle too. He said, "Sure, I don't bite." And, like, chuckled. He was like, "I don't bite." Okay, sir. Right. Because, my bad. You're so right. It's just, like, it's not like you have a bomb or anything. Like, oh my gosh. He's just funny. And then, another one of the flight attendants asked if she could leave. And he replied, quote, "Whatever you ladies like to do." End quote. I'm sorry, I can't get over him. I can't get over this man. So then Muck, who decided to stay, because whatever, tried to give him the instructions for the parachute, and he told her that he didn't need them. He said, "I'm good, girl. I don't need them." And whatever, I mean, sure. Apparently not only is he a funny guy, he's a parachute pro. Allegedly. The investigators did think, like, all jokes aside, they did think he actually probably did know a lot about aircrafts, because he made a lot of weird demands with that I'll get to in a minute, about the aircraft itself. So investigators did truly think that, like, this guy probably does know a lot about aircrafts, and some people even thought that he was probably in the Air Force at one point, which is why he knew so much, and also why he knew a lot about, like, the plane itself, and why he knew a lot about parachutes, which is kind of interesting to me. But there was a delay in the refueling process, so a second truck and then a third was brought to the aircraft to refuel. During the delay, Muck and Cooper complained that the money was in a cloth bag and not a knapsack, but he said that he kind of, like, he could improvise. He said, "I'm flexible." So he actually took the money and stuck it in one of the parachute's bags, because, like, they come in, like, I don't know how to explain it. I'll try to put a picture up here, okay? Editing me. Put a picture right here of what a parachute bag looks like, and he stuck it in there and tied it to his waist. So let's get into these weird demands that he made about the plane, which really proves that he did his research about this plane itself. He said that he gave the pilot a flight plan that said he wanted to take a southeast course to Mexico City at the minimum airspeed possible without stalling the aircraft, approximately 100 knots. He said at a maximum 10,000 foot altitude. Cooper also instructed to keep the landing gear deployed and lower the wing flaps to 15 degrees and leave the cabin unpressurized, which I don't know a lot about planes. It's not a special interest of mine. But I do know that the reason he wanted the cabin unpressurized is because, like, opening a cabin that's pressurized is really, really hard. And that's why in planes you often get, like, your ears will pop. That's because it's pressurized in there. So when they pressurize it, your ears sometimes will pop. It's like when you go, like, to higher altitude, like when you're driving and you go up, like, a mountain. But opening it is really hard in a pressurized cabin. That's like the same thing when your car is sinking and it's like you don't want to, like, you want the pressure inside the car to match the pressure outside the car. So you, in order to open the door, you want to, like, let all the water in, which is, like, really scary, but it's the only way you're going to be able to get, like, the door open. It's like the same concept, basically. So the pilot informed Cooper that this would limit the aircraft's range to about 1,000 miles, so a second refueling would be necessary. He's like, we're gonna have to stop again. And Cooper was kind of like, yeah, you know, it's fine. Like, whatever you gotta do. And they were going to have to stop and basically refuel at Reno Tahoe International Airport. And Cooper was like, that's cool. You know, my plans are flexible, you know? Like, I'm not really in a rush to get anywhere. Another thing, too, was that they told him they couldn't have the flight stairs down when they took off. And Cooper told them, he said, actually, that it can be done. Do it. And the captain was like, I'm not doing it. Like, it's unsafe for everybody here. I'm not doing it. And Cooper was like, okay, fine. Sure. I guess it's fine, you know? Which, once again, just really flexible on his demands here, you know? Like, just not getting really what he wants, truly. So, the plane takes off again, and Muck and Cooper are back in the passenger area. Super cool. Amazing. Unbeknownst to Cooper, there is 2, and I'm going to butcher this, F-106 fighter jets that are, like, to the point, they're back far enough to where Cooper can't see them. This was because basically, like, they didn't want Cooper to see them, but they also wanted somebody to be there just in case he decided to blow up the plane. And later on, like, it says that they didn't see anything, like, at all. So I don't even know why they were there. It seemed pretty pointless in my opinion, because they had literally no useful information about this case. So what were you even doing? But whatever, I guess I'm not a fighter jet pilot. Maybe I'm just hating from outside the club. But this was kind of where things get juicy. So Cooper asks Muck to help him open the flight stairs, because they can be opened during flight. And she's kind of like, what if I get, like, sucked out? And Cooper's just like, come on, help me, girl. Like, I need help opening this. Just help me. And she's like, can I tie myself to something? And he's like, no, just help me open it. And she's like, I'm really worried about getting sucked out. And he was like, whatever. So he was just like, go back to the cockpit. Leave me alone. I'll figure it out, you know? And she's like, okay, like, are you sure? And he's like, yeah, just go back to the cockpit. I'll figure it out. So before she heads off to the cockpit, she looks at Cooper and she makes a plea to him, because at this point she's probably thinking, okay, he's gonna jump, and she's also probably thinking, I'm gonna die, because he's got a bomb, right? And if he's jumping out of the plane, he's probably leaving the bomb on this plane. So she looks at him and she says, quote, please take the bomb with you, end quote. And Cooper replied very casually he would either disarm it or he would take it with him. She went back to the cockpit. She told them what had happened, and they, in fact, like, there was nothing they could do. It's not like, they just kind of had to hope at that point, like, hopes and prayers, because you can't force him. I mean, the guy's got a bomb, right? They are waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting, because basically they don't want to go back there because he told them not to come back there, but they also don't know if he is still back there, you know? Like, so it's kind of like this tense waiting game. And also they don't know, like, is the bomb gonna go off? Is the bomb back there right now? Is he setting up the bomb? Did he jump out of the plane? There's a lot of what ifs in this situation currently. The last thing Muck recalls seeing is that she saw Cooper standing in the aisle. He sort of looked like he was making a decision, she said, and he was tying what appeared to be the bag of money to his waist, and that was the last thing she saw before going to the cockpit, where she would stay. And she was the last person to see Cooper at roughly 8 p.m. Around roughly 8:13, sorry. Around 8:13, the tail section of the aircraft sort of pitched upward, And this is when they believe that he actually jumped out, because the stairs were said to have been opened at like 8:05, because they get the little alert in the cockpit. So 8:05 is when they said that like it had been opened, which was 5 minutes after Muck had left to go be in the cockpit. And then at 8:13, the tail of the plane pitched upward, which is when they think he actually jumped out of the plane. So the aircraft pilots basically took that time period and where they were on the flight plan and sort of put together an area in which they believed would have been the zone where he had jumped out of the plane. Now, immediately, they obviously don't know if he jumped out the plane, so they actually, like, spoke to him over the intercom a lot, asking, like, hey, like, are you still back there? Do you need any help? And eventually they put Muck on, because they figured if he's going to respond to anybody, he's going to respond to Muck, because she's who's had the most contact with him. Well, so they landed in the Reno Tahoe airport, and the cabin was quickly searched by the pilot, and was determined that D.B Cooper was no longer on the plane. Which, I mean, they figured, but he didn't take any hostages. So they were happy about that, because they really thought he was taking Muck with him, but he did not take Muck. But at 11:02, with the air stairs still deployed, they landed in Reno Tahoe, and Reno police established a perimeter around the aircraft, and they searched it to find no bomb on board. So DB had in fact taken it with him, which is what he told Muck that he was going to do. And the FBI bomb squad declared that it was officially safe. There was 0 bomb on board, which means he took it with him, and that means we'll never know if it was a real bomb. So now we are on to investigation. There's a lot of evidence that goes missing in this case for some reason, which is upsetting. In addition to 66 fingerprints aboard the plane, the FBI agents also recovered Cooper's black tie, which they found out was a clip-on tie, which I don't know why I got stuck on that detail, but I got stuck on that detail for, like, far too long. I just think it's funny that this, like, hijacker guy in this, like, business suit and loafers, like, had a clip-on tie. I don't know. Because when I think, like, businessman, I don't think, like, oh, his tie's a clip-on tie. Which, fun fact for you guys, I actually know how to tie a tie. One of my, it was my civics and econ teacher taught us how to tie ties. They found 2 of the 4 parachutes still left on board, and one of them had in fact been, like, opened, and then the other one had not been opened. And the thing about these parachutes is 1 out of the 4 had been actually a dummy parachute, and that had been one of the ones that DB took and jumped out of the plane. Like, I don't think it was the one that he was wearing necessarily. Like, it wasn't the main one that was set up, but it was one of the ones that he took, which is kind of interesting, especially for a guy who seemed to know so much about, like, planes and parachutes and all that. It just seemed like very weird that he would have taken the dummy one. The other one he took was, like, apparently a really old one that was used for military purposes that hadn't been opened in a while. So he took, like, the worst 2, but I digress. Investigators interviewed eyewitnesses from Portland, Seattle in the airport, as well as, like, people in Reno. So they interviewed people from the airport in Portland, they interviewed people in Seattle, and they interviewed people in Reno. So anybody who had seen DB, they pretty much interviewed and were like, hey, like, what did he look like? What was the vibe, you know? And everyone pretty much gave the same description, and from this, we got our famous sketch of D.B. Cooper, which I will put right here. There you go. And that is the composite sketch of what people said that they thought he looked like. And it is pretty infamous, and it was broadcasted like absolutely everywhere nationwide. And it's a very like famous police sketch, I'd say. I think like a lot of people who are into the conspiracy theories, true crime, space definitely have seen this. And even like if you aren't, you've probably seen it like on TikTok. It was circulating for like, I think in like 2022, it was circulating for a while, and people were like, this guy hijacked a plane, you know? And it was like a big thing. I don't know. TikTok's weird. But it was also broadcasted immediately, like absolutely immediately. As soon as they got it, bam, pumped it out everywhere, every news station. So I do want to talk a little bit about this man's name, because if you look up this case, it pops up under D.B Cooper, which is what most people know this case as, is the case of D.B Cooper, which is great, except for the fact that it's not this man's name, and actually it originated from a news misprint. Local and federal authorities told news stations to put out this sketch and put out the information and asked the public basically if they knew this man. And so they did. And CBS Evening News reported the name as D.A. Cooper, which was incorrect. And then the Oregon Journal recorded it as D.B. Cooper. And then United Press International republished the D.B. Cooper name. And then other media outlets took it and published the D.B. Cooper name. And this is why a lot of people know him as D.B. Cooper to this day, because that's what was reported on most like public news stations, because it was basically a big game of telephone. Is that the people who were there were like, it's Dan Cooper, and then they were like, oh, it's D.A. Cooper, and then they were like, nah, it's D.B. Cooper. It's just Dan Cooper. So really it's D.C. Which like that's kind of weird, that D.C. Anyway, but yes, so D.B. Cooper's literally not even his name, which I just thought was a funny tidbit to include, because I knew this case as D.B. Cooper, and a lot of people know this case as D.B. Cooper, and that's just not his name. I'm sure like if he survived the jump, which is speculated upon, I'm sure like he's watching that and he's like, D.B. Cooper, what the heck? He's like, they didn't even get my name right. And actually, due to this, because police figured that he maybe used his like real name as on the ticket, they actually interviewed a local man named D.B. Cooper, and the Portland Cooper, because he was from Portland, actually had a minor police record, but was quickly eliminated as a suspect. Due to the number of, like, variables and parameters, narrowing down the exact area where I'm gonna keep calling him DB, because I can't help it, or DB actually had jumped, was kind of hard, because obviously, like, they don't know, they speculate the time that he jumped, but they don't know it for an exact fact. So it was definitely harder to, like, look for a person when you don't even know where they jumped out, you know? It was also hard too, because like, here's the thing. With parachutes, where you land is also very determined on when you pull the ripcord. So it's kind of hard to determine that too, because obviously nobody knows when he pulled the ripcord. Even if they could determine the exact time that he jumped out, they have no idea when this man pulled his parachute, because that really does determine, I went on a whole rabbit hole on this, that really does determine like where you're gonna land. So they sort of narrowed it down to an area that they thought could possibly be where he was, but obviously it's not going to be super exact, and it's probably not going to be super accurate, but they did their best. And also another thing too, the two F-106 pilots didn't see anything. Narrow down this area, and I say narrow down, it's a very big area, but they try to narrow down this area and then search this area, because they believe that's where he jumped. So on December 6th, 1971, roughly 12 days after the incident, FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover approved the use of U.S. Air Force. U.S. Air Force Blackbirds to basically take pictures of Flight 305's air path or flight path to see if they could locate any items that DB might have like dropped while jumping. So they go ahead and do this over the, like, not the whole flight path, but just the one after they'd done the refueling. So they go through and they take these pictures and they try to find anything, but due to poor visibility, the pictures were pretty much deemed like useless, like they couldn't tell anything. So, needless to say, another dead end for these guys. These poor FBI agents are really just striking out because they don't know nothing about nothing, truly. They're like, who's this guy? They don't even know his name. They can't even get his name right. Dan? DB? DA? Who? What? What do you look like? I don't even know. So, yeah, these pictures did nothing. It was a complete waste of time and resources. So, when the tail of the plane did that little, like, up and down thing, they believed that was around the southmost outreach of Mount St. Helens. So that's kind of where they focused the search on, because they were hoping to find, maybe not necessarily him, but like maybe one of the parachutes, maybe his briefcase, maybe his shoes, or just anything really. Because so far all they have is this man's clip-on tie and a couple of cigarette butts. He was very good at, like, taking evidence, which the cigarette butts kind of, I don't know, they make me a little, like, confused, because he literally took the notes back. Like, the notes that he gave the pilot and the flight attendants, like, he asked for them back and took them back. And even the match that he gave Muck to light her cigarette with, he took that back. Like, took it with him. So he was very good about, like, taking evidence with him. So the fact that he left, like, his cigarette butts on the plane kind of, like, weirded me out. I don't know. But maybe he just didn't care. I don't know. So they sent out helicopters and boats and did searches of local farmhouses and fields and barns in the area where they thought DB probably landed. They set up patrol boats along the Lake Merwin and Yale Lake reservoirs, which is immediately east, and neither Cooper nor any of his belongings were found during any of these searches, which, once again, another dead end for our investigators. They used fixed-wing aircrafts and helicopters from the Oregon Army National Guard. The FBI conducted aerial searches along the entire flight path known as Victor 23, which I didn't know they named flight paths, but that's kind of cool. I'd like to be the person who names these things, you know, like hurricanes. How does one become a designated hurricane namer? They also, like, did, like, sweeps of the water areas. I don't know how to explain it. Like, they take these, like they're like those little sand sifter things that you'd play with in the beach as a kid. They basically take, like, big one of those and, like, run it through the lakes, and it, like, picks up things. They did that. They did a lot of, like, extensive searches. Like, they really wanted to find anything about this guy. The only, like, slightly possible lead that they found was a burglary in the town of Battleground, Washington, and, like, it was kind of close to where they thought DB probably would have jumped. So it was a burglary of, like a store, just a regular, like a smaller grocery store, but it also sells, like, it's not just groceries, it's, like, other things. So kind of like a Walmart, but just, like, a small town version. And the person only stole, like, survival equipment. So, like, beef jerky and, like, matches and things like that. So, and this was, like, not too long after DB would have, like, landed in that area. So police look into this, but it was said that the witnesses at the scene of the burglary said that the dude who robbed them was wearing military grade combat hiking boots, and DB was said to be wearing loafers. So police decided that this probably wasn't him because the shoe wear was so different. But stealing survival supplies makes sense. There was a brief incident where these two guys came forward with $30,000 worth of $20 bills printed with D.B Cooper's serial numbers on them, but they were later found to be counterfeit. So none of the bills had been found immediately, which is crazy. But a lot of the news stations were offering rewards as well, so they were hoping that they would get some form of lead through this. And there was actually quite a few incidents that came up of people being claiming that they had these bills, but none of them actually did. Which there's got to be a psychological reason people do that. Because you hear about that a lot, or people confessing to being serial killers. What's that about? In 1974, still no bills had been discovered matching those of the $20 bills given to D.B. Cooper. So this was kind of weighing on police, because obviously you want to solve it. This is a high stakes case. You want to solve it. But still, none of the ransom money was discovered. So later developments come of this case, and these all get a little confusing, so I'm going to try to read word for word. But an analysis of the flight data indicated in the first estimated location of Cooper's landing zone was considered inaccurate. Captain Scott, who was flying the aircraft manually because of Cooper's speed and altitude demands. That was another thing too. The speed and the altitude and the wing angle that he wanted it at could not be done on autopilot. It had to be done on manual, which is a lot of the times captains, especially of commercial aircrafts, they fly on autopilot, and determined that the flight path was farther east than initially reported. Additional data provided by Continental Airlines pilot Tom Bohan, who was flying 4 minutes behind Flight 305, led the FBI to recalculate its estimates of Cooper's drop zone. Bohan observed the FBI's calculations for Cooper's drop zone were based on incorrectly recorded wind direction, and therefore the estimates were considered inaccurate. Based on Bohan's data and subsequent recalculations of the flight path, the FBI determined Cooper's drop zone was probably over Washougal River watershed. That was a lot of W's that I can't handle. In 1986, Agent Ralph Himmensblatch wrote, quote, "I have to confess, if I were going to look for Cooper, I would head for the Washougal." End quote. The Washougal Valley and the surrounding areas were repeatedly searched, but no discoveries traceable to the hijacking have been reported. The FBI believes any remaining physical clues were probably destroyed in the 1980 eruption of Mount St. Helens, which is probably true, which that's a whole nother, crazy event that I would totally do a soapbox about talking about. But basically, the first original searches that they did were in the wrong location, which sucks. And yeah, after the eruption of St. Helens, it took out everything. I mean, it took out everything in its path. So any evidence that was probably left was most likely destroyed. So on July 8th, 2016, the investigation was subsequently put on hold, and this was due to lack of manpower and lack of resources and lack of just funding in general. This case had been going on for so long, and also they were getting pretty much nowhere, which is just disheartening and frustrating to investigators. So they did in fact put it on hold. They didn't close it. It wasn't considered closed or solved or anything. They just put it on hold. This was only reopened up when DNA testing became a really big thing, because obviously they had fingerprints, and not only did they have fingerprints, but they had the cigarette butts. So they figured with DNA testing, they could definitely get a match. So now I'm going to tell you the evidence that was found. They found the clip-on necktie, 2 pieces of hair, the cigarette butts, they found the fingerprints, and they also determined that the necktie was only sold at JCPenney. Which I don't even remember the last time I was in a JCPenney, to be completely honest with you, but pop off. They also determined that the 1 piece of hair would not have been able to be used as DNA evidence, but the other one definitely did have enough to it to do DNA testing, which, hooray, huzzah! We love that. And by late 2007, the FBI had built a partial DNA profile with a few samples found on Cooper's tie. So not a full one, but a partial one. And they also had the cigarette butts and determined that one of them probably had enough DNA on it to put together a full DNA profile. So they put all this stuff away to keep it safe, to wait until DNA testing got better, and then it could be tested. They also had sampled the fingerprints against the ones that they had in their database, but they didn't have any matches, and then the fingerprints were later lost in one of the movings between different crime labs, and the hair that was found in his seat was was also destroyed because they had moved it from one of the FBI crime laboratories, and that one determined that it had lacked the right amount of DNA, so they just threw them out. So now the FBI is banking on these cigarette butts, right? They're perfect. We're really gonna have a hole in one, a slam dunk with the cigarette butts. They were not able to find these cigarette butts, but not all hope was in fact lost, because lo and behold, on February 10th, 1980, some of the ransom money would be found. So an 8-year-old, which crazy that it was an 8-year-old, that kind of makes me giggle, I'm not gonna lie, and his name was Brian Ingram. He was vacationing with his family on the Columbian River, and he was digging in the sand as an 8-year-old does. And this was at a beachfront known as Tenna, I don't know how you say that, bar, and it was about 9 miles, 14 kilometers, downstream from Vancouver, Washington, and 20 miles, 32 kilometers, southwest of Ariel. And it was pretty much like a sandy riverbank kind of area, so Brian was digging in the sand, and he comes across 2 packets of $120 bills. So not like $120 bills, if that makes sense. And they had the same serial numbers as the ones given to Cooper. So these were determined to be part of the ransom money, which, huzzah, finally, we found it. And you would think that this is our big break in the case, but let me tell you, this only led to more questions. More questions than it did answers. So originally they thought these bills had washed up on this beach, but one, they were buried, which I guess erosion and sediment and all that, but they looked purposefully buried, you know what I'm saying? Somebody buried them there. And also the free floating theory kind of gets debunked, because where they had determined that D.B Cooper would have landed, the river, because they thought they dropped in the river when he landed or whatever, and left, because one of the bundles only had 90 $20 bills instead of the 100, so 10 bills were missing. So they thought it floated up the river. Well, the only thing about that is that the river was flowing in the opposite direction. So instead of going down river, it was the other way. It was up river from where it would have been, you know? So it was flowing in the opposite. I explained that really terribly. I'm so sorry. So the river would have had to been, so like here's the river. It would have had to been flowing this way for the bills to get where they were, but the river was flowing that way. So that debunked that theory. And in 1986, there was like basically a discussion on what should happen to these bills, and they were equally divided between Brian Ingram and Northwest Airlines insurer Royal Global Insurance. So he got some money for it, so good on him. 8 years old. Well, so he would have been like 14. I'm sorry, I'm bad at math. It's not my strong suit. So, unfortunately, this didn't really lead to any more answers. It just led to more questions of, like, how the heck did these bills get here? How the heck did they get buried? How the heck did any of this occur? Because, like, the river's flowing the wrong way, so they didn't, like, just wash up there. Did somebody else find the bills and bury them? Did DB bury them? Why would he have buried them? Why would he have not, like, taken them with him? Was he around there somewhere? It just led to way more questions than it did answers for the investigators. So, but this did like bring the case more to light again and really had people getting into it and investigating it again, which was, you know, kind of nice because it took a dip there and then it went back up, and then in 2016 it like got technically closed, but still. And then another thing, too, that I like is that Brian actually got to keep some of the money. Because, like, finders keepers, you know what I mean? Like, I would have kept some of it. I feel like that's only fair. So there's a lot of, like, weird theories around this whole case. And a lot of them stem from just the overall weirdness of the interactions, which I agree. A lot of people, like, I think one of the most widely believed ones is that Cooper didn't survive the jump. And even if he did survive the jump, he didn't survive the elements, because what Cooper was, it was very cold. The wind was very extreme. It was very freezing. He was only wearing a business suit and like a trench coat. He was not equipped for this kind of weather, and a lot of people think that even if he survived the jump somehow, that he didn't survive the elements, which is very possible, you know, but I don't know, because he seems so knowledgeable about everything that I feel like kind of maybe he survived, or like, I don't know, something. He had another a change of clothes. I don't know, something. But a lot of people don't even think he survived the jump because the parachute that he took was very old and the other one was a dummy parachute. So a lot of people think like he didn't even survive the fall. And also it was really windy, so a lot of people thought that he probably just didn't survive, which is feasible. My only thing is, though, like, then what happened to the money? You know? Because, like, they searched that area extensively. So, like, if he didn't survive the fall, wouldn't the, like, money be, like, hanging from a tree somewhere, or, like, on the ground or something, you know? Like, wouldn't that be where it is? Wouldn't they have found it by now? Another weird thing is him knowing all that stuff about the plane. That was kind of weird. Like, he knew about how, like, the air stairs and, like, the wings and, like, the altitude and the speed that it could go at. So that was also kind of weird. He also seemed to know a lot about, like, the area, which is also kind of weird. They think he was probably an Air Force veteran, just because of his knowledge, or they thought he was, like, a thrill seeker who had been, like, skydiving or, like, knew a lot about planes. They definitely thought he was some type of... they definitely thought he knew a lot about planes. They thought he definitely worked with them. They thought maybe he had worked as, like, an aerospace engineer, which is kind of interesting, you know, that's a thought that maybe, and that's why he would know, like, the inner workings of it, but none of that could be confirmed, obviously, because they never found DB. They also kind of thought that maybe he had necessarily not been a hijacker before. Like, they definitely didn't think he was, like, some violent person. Because, especially from what the flight attendant said, he didn't seem like he was doing it because he wanted people to get hurt. He definitely... It didn't seem like he wanted anyone to be injured or be harmed in any way. The only harmful thing he had was the bomb, and like, they can't even confirm that it was a real bomb, so whether or not that's true, we don't know. Also, another thing too is, like, he didn't take, like, hostages, you know? Like, he didn't, like, I mean, he did, but he didn't. Like, he wasn't threatening anyone. He wasn't, like, holding Muck hostage and being like, if you move, I'm gonna, like, blow this whole plane up, you know? That's not what he was doing. So he definitely didn't seem like he was a hijacker or, like, someone who was really angry. He seemed like just a guy, you know? And honestly, with the money being found on the beach, like, he doesn't even seem like he really wanted the money, and it wasn't spent anywhere, you know? So it doesn't even seem like he really did it for the money. It's like, I don't even know what his motive would have been for this crime, because none of it really made sense. So, like, if he is dead somewhere, wouldn't he, like, if he died on impact, wouldn't there be, like, a body or money? And then another thing too, if he did escape, why wasn't the money spent anywhere? Why wasn't it, like, why was it found buried on a beach? And why was it, like, not, just nothing. I don't know. And nobody ever, like, claimed to really see DB after this either. So I don't know. It's just all weird to me. And I want to read you, like, some quotes from one of the FBI agents. So J. Earl Miles, the special agent in charge of the Seattle FBI office at the time of the hijacking, believes Cooper did survive. In a 1976 interview, he cited 3 reasons he thought Cooper got away with it. First, the 727 was a safe airliner from which to jump. Second, the area between Woodland and Vancouver into which Cooper jumped features wide open spaces ideal for parachute landings. And third, believe that the weather conditions were adequate for a safe parachute jump, end quote. So, I kind of agree with that. I don't know. I think maybe DB got away. I don't think he got away with it. He did get away with it, because at this point, like, I don't know statutes of limitations for these things, because, like, I know statute of limitations for murder, but, like, I don't know about hijacking planes. But I think at this point, like, it's been so long. It's been, like, I think 45 years. He got away with it. Or at this point, he's, like, because he was 40 at the time. It's been 45 years. The man's, like, 80 something, you know? Like, he got away with it. Let's keep, if he's still alive, he's probably in his 80s, you know? Somewhere in there. Maybe he could be maybe older, because I don't know. They said he was in his 40s probably, so, like, 40 plus 45. Yeah, he's probably 80s or higher, you know? Quick maths for you. So he did get away with it. Let's keep, at this point, they're not, even if they found him, right? They're never getting that money back. That's never happening. And also, like, what, you're gonna arrest him? Like, come on. Like, how long is he realistically gonna get for that? Nobody was hurt. And that's another thing, too, that, like, if I was an investigator, I wouldn't have tried that hard. I'd be like, nobody got hurt. Whatever. You know? Oh, we can't find him. What a shame. Another thing, too, is, like, he seemed so knowledgeable that I have a hard time thinking that, like, he didn't make it. In October 1976, another senior FBI agent from the Seattle office, speaking anonymously, gave his opinion in the Seattle Times. Quote, "I think Cooper made it. I think he slept in his own bed that night. It was a clear night. A lot of the county is pretty flat. He could have just walked out, right down the road. Hell, they weren't even looking for him there at that time. They thought he was somewhere else. He could have just walked down the road." End quote. Which, You know what? I kind of agree with that. My personal opinion is that he got away with it. Now I'm going to give you some suspects about this, who they thought maybe D.B. Cooper could be. And the first suspect is Ted Braden. Theodore Burdett Braden Jr. He died in 2007. He was a U.S. Special Forces commando during the Vietnam War. He was a master skydiver and was a convicted felon. And they sort of thought that this could be him because they did think that DB was a Air Force veteran, and they also thought that he probably was in the Vietnam War because of the knowledge he had about the plane. Not only that, but he sort of, kind of, a little bit looked like the sketch. And he also served as a military skydiving instructor, which would mean he's very familiar with parachutes, which means he probably also, because he took the military one. That's a good point. He took the military one, so he would know about those. He also was teaching high altitude military, like jumping, which is a little weird because DB wanted it at a lower altitude. So maybe not. Maybe that's wrong. That was a little too much. I kind of just messed that up. It's fine. But he was discharged in 1967, and little is known about his life after he was discharged, so it's kind of hard to, like, really pinpoint what homie was doing. And he was a convicted felon, too, which also sort of made police, like, kind of a little suspicious of him. I have to go fix this. I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. And he was convicted for stealing $250,000 in a trucking scam he allegedly devised. And in 1980, he was charged by a federal jury for driving an 18-wheeler full of stolen goods. So maybe he committed the thing in Washington, the robbery of the survival stuff. But, yeah, that's what he was convicted for, which I don't even know, like, that's just a lot. An 18-wheeler full of stolen goods is kind of funny to me. I don't know. That just made me giggle when I read that. I was like, oh, okay. Anyway, but he was determined to be a lot, like, shorter than DB was, and also he appeared like, I don't know, like, he was more tan than DB was. They said DB was a little bit pale, which I'm not judging. I'm a pale person, but he was very tan. Like, Ted was very tan. So, yeah, people didn't really think this was DB. And also, just, like, the timeline of things didn't really necessarily match up because of, like, age and everything. It just, they didn't really think it was DB. They kind of thought it was a little off. They thought something was a little off. They didn't think it was him. So we move on to our next suspect, which is Kenneth Christensen. Which, every time I say Christensen, I think of, oh my gosh, what's that guy? Hayden Christensen. In case you're wondering. But Kenneth was a very interesting guy, and he was, I don't even know how to explain it. He enlisted in the Army in 1994, and he was trained as a paratrooper, but people said he was just a little, like, weird. Like, I don't even know how to describe, like, I don't know. Like, in interviews, they were just like, he's weird. And, like, going through things about him, I was like, yeah, he is kind of weird. He is just kind of a weird guy. Eclectic, maybe, is the right word. World War II had ended by the time he was deployed in 1945, but he made occasional training jumps while stationed in Ally-occupied Japan during the late 1940s. After leaving the Army, he joined Northwest Orient Airlines in 1954 as a laborer and was stationed at the company's Far East stopover on Shaman Island. He subsequently became a flight attendant and pursued his career based in Seattle, which very interesting. And that would also be a thing that he would know, like the flight schedules and the planes and all that. Although DB did say he didn't have a grudge against the airline, so maybe not, maybe not. And a lot of the people in the public thought this was him, but they showed the cabin crew, specifically Schaffner and Gregory, and it didn't really fit like what she remembered DB looking like, which is kind of seeming to be a common theme here. But you know what I was thinking about? Maybe they just didn't want him to be found. Because he was, like, really nice to them, you know? Like, maybe they just didn't want... All these flight attendants are like, I don't know, that's like... A matter of fact, I actually can't... I don't know, you know? It could be him, I don't know, it could be not him. You know, one thing I did notice, though, about the suspects for this case is none of them ever denied being D.B Cooper. Which is kind of interesting to me. Like, the first guy never once denied being D.B Cooper. Like, he just, like... was like, maybe, who knows, which is kind of funny to me. But yeah, all three of them just couldn't figure it out. Another suspect we have is Jack, I'm gonna butcher his last name, Coffelt, I think is how you say it. Bryant Jack Coffelt was a con man, and I just think, like, being called a con man makes you sound like a cartoon villain. I was a con man. Okay. Looney Tunes. Anyway, he was an ex-convict, and he also kind of, like, claimed to know a bunch of inside government information and had claimed to have been the chauffeur and confidant of Abraham Lincoln's last undisputed descendant, great-grandson Robert Todd Lincoln Beckwith. Yeah. And he, like, was in and out of prison a lot, and he kind of matched the description of who they thought D.B Cooper looked like, and he claimed to a cellmate, which was James Brown, that he was D.B Cooper, and he claimed that he had landed in Mount Hood, which was about 50 miles, 80 kilometers, southeast of Ariel, and that he injured himself and lost the money in the process. Photos of him did resemble the drawings, and the only thing that people said is that, like, he would have been hit mid to late 50s in 1971, and he was reportedly in Portland on the day of the hijacking and sustained injuries at the time which were consistent with skydiving, but several details in the confession was sort of like he had said stuff that wasn't out to the public yet, which made people believe that he probably was D.B Cooper. But then again, like, my thought process on that is kind of like, okay, but these are just assumed details. Like, a lot of the details in this case aren't actually details. They aren't confirmed. They're just what they assume happened. So if this guy had any parachuting knowledge, he probably could come up with these on his own. But maybe that's just me being a Debbie Downer. But he actually died in 1975. And, like, so they couldn't interview him, you know? Because his cellmate just came out and said this, like, years later. But he could never be interviewed because he was already dead. And a lot of, like, news programs, like CBS and 60 Minutes, decided that this story was just, like, non-void and never even published it because none of it can be confirmed or denied. So maybe Jack's our guy. Maybe Jack's not our guy. I don't know. Another person is Lynn Cooper, which would make sense. The Cooper thing. That's all right. We like the Cooper thing. John Doyle was considered L.D. Cooper, and a leather worker in the Korean War, and a Korean War veteran. So after the Korean War, he went to work on leather, which is interesting. He was proposed as a suspect in July 2011 by his niece, Marla Cooper. As an 8-year-old, she recalled Cooper and another uncle planning something very mischievous involving use of expensive walkie-talkies at her grandmother's house in Oregon, 150 miles southeast of Portland. And the next day, Flight 305 was hijacked. So, I mean, possibly, maybe. Marla also came up with a pretty interesting take, and that was because there was a Canadian comic book that was about a hero who would jump out of planes named Dan Cooper, and Marla said that he had one of these comic books thumbtacked to his wall. So, this is interesting, because maybe that's where he got the, even if it wasn't Lynn, you know, someone else got the name Dan Cooper from these comic books. And another thing that I'm putting together here is that when D.B asked for the money, he said, negotiable American currency. Now, if you're American, right, you'd probably just say, like, I want cash. Like, you want American currency. Because, like, America, we don't think about other people's currencies. We don't think about that. That's irrelevant to us, okay? You'd probably just say, like, I want, like, $200,000, like, unmarked cash. You know? So, maybe our hijacker was Canadian. Just a thought. But I could be completely wrong. You know, I'm just a goober on the internet. Don't listen to a thing I'm saying. So, there was a lot more suspects, but I'm going to talk about one of the more believed ones, which is that of Richard McCoy. And Richard McCoy Jr. is actually his full name. He was an Army veteran who served 2 tours of duty in Vietnam, first as a demolition expert and later with the Green Berets as a helicopter pilot. So, I mean, it's not plane, but he knows stuff about air, like, you know, that stuff, I suppose. And he was also considered to look a lot like the sketch, and I'll try to put a picture up here. But people said that he looked a lot like the sketch, which is a big reason why a lot of people believe that it was probably him, which that's a valid like thought. Because the sketch kind of had a weird shaped head. Richard's kind of got a weird shaped head. You know, I could see it. I could definitely see it. But he also was a warrant officer and in the Utah National Guard. He was an avid recreational skydiver with aspirations of becoming a Utah State Trooper. On April 7th, 1972, McCoy staged the best known of the copycat hijackings. He boarded United Airlines Flight 855, a Boeing with the 727 with the air stairs, and this was in Denver, Colorado, and he had a paperweight that resembled a hand grenade and an unloaded pistol. He demanded 4 parachutes and $500,000. After the delivery of the money and the parachutes at San Francisco National Airport, McCoy ordered the aircraft back in the sky, and he bailed out of the aircraft over Provo, Utah, leaving behind his handwritten hijacking instructions and his fingerprints on a magazine he was reading. So a little more sloppy than DB, but definitely very close. And this is why also a lot of people thought that he was probably the guy because he did this. But personally, if I'm keeping it honest with everybody, I think he was probably just a copycat. He probably saw like the fame and the notoriety that DB got and wanted some of that, and so he just did a copycat one. But a lot of people really thought it was Richard. And now it's the time where I give my final thoughts on the case. So my final thoughts are that DB got away with it. I believe that. I think he got away with it. I think he probably, just like that FBI agent said, he probably just walked down the road to be completely honest with you. I mean, they were looking in the wrong area. Not only that, but like the way it was executed so terribly yet so well. And he was really nice to like all the flight attendants, so I'm not even mad at him, but I'm pretty sure like he probably just walked down the road. I don't believe he's dead. I don't believe it. I refuse to believe that. I think he just went back to his normal life. Probably. I don't know. He probably went back to his normal life. He probably said, whatever. And I don't even think he spent the $200,000. I think he probably buried it all somewhere. I think he just did it to prove that he could do it. Or, I don't know. He just did it because he could do it, you know? I don't think... I mean, maybe he spent it. Or maybe he, like, swapped it somewhere. I don't know. But either way, I feel like he definitely got away with it. And I hope... Personally, like I said, I think they should come out and be like, hey, like, we're not even going to arrest you or whatever, like, statutes of limitations. And I want him to sit down and do a documentary. Like a 6-part docuseries about what the heck that was. Also, like, I don't know. I just have, like, so many questions that I'll never get answers to. I would love to interview him, though. So, like, DB, if you're, like, I won't even snitch on you, for real. I won't even snitch on you. But I need to know personally. So if you're still out there and you're seeing this, which I doubt you are, but if you are, hit me up. Hit me up. I don't even need any money. Shoot. I just want the information. 'Cause, like, why? How? For what reason? Why was the money on the beach? Why did he take the dummy one? Why did he want the money? Why was it never spent? Why? Just why? Just for what reason? Why that plane? Why then? Why Portland? Why Washington? Why that area? I just have so many questions. But to be honest with you, I kind of love D.B Cooper. I kind of love him. He just was so polite and nice to the people, and he was just like, I don't know, he's just so funny to me. He's like, whatever you ladies want to do. That really stuck with me. Whatever you ladies want to do. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I will hand it back over to outro me. And that is all I have for you in today's case. I sure do hope that you enjoyed this as much as you can enjoy a true crime case, though this one was a lot less heavy than my typical ones. I hope you enjoyed my commentary, and I also hope that you enjoyed the makeup look. If you guys want tutorials, please let me know, because if I get enough, like, people wanting them, I'll do them again. Hopefully better than I did the last one. And let me know what kind of makeup looks you guys would want me to, like, teach you how to do, because I've been doing makeup for... like 6 years now, I'd say. 6 or 7. So, I wouldn't say I'm an expert by any means, but I would say I know a thing or two about a thing or two. So, definitely let me know if you guys want those. I've done one. I'm definitely down to do more. But I hope that you enjoyed today's case. And once again, if you've got any comments, questions, or concerns, please leave them in the comments down below. I'd love to hear from you guys. Also, let me know what your leading theory is on this case, or whether you think he was a good guy or a bad guy. Please let me know, because I'm really interested to see. I feel like it's going to be a mixed bag down there in the comments, and I can't wait to, like, be lurking in there. So, but I hope you guys have an amazing day, and remember, be kind, be yourself, and don't forget to like and subscribe. And I'll see you in the next one, okay? I love you. Bye-bye.